Usually when we talk about a beautiful piece of art, like a painting hanging in a quiet museum, or even just a perfectly designed minimalist logo, we reach for words like inspiration or soul.
Right. Emotion, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's this profoundly subjective human experience.
Mm.
But what if we completely flip the script? What if the actual essence of a beautiful drawing could be mathematically defined by, and this sounds crazy how incredibly short its computer code is.
Yeah, we are essentially taking the cold, hard, binary logic of computer algorithms and just slamming it headfirst into the deeply subjective realm of human aesthetics.
It's wild.
Is a radical way to look at why we find things visually pleasing.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive with you today, because when you sent us this stack of notes centered around a 1997 paper titled Low Complexity Art by computer scientist Jürgen Schmidhuber, the premise immediately hooked us.
Oh, I knew it would. It's such a unique perspective.
We're looking at the concept of fine art through this highly analytical, almost retro-futuristic lens of a late 90s computer scientist. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To understand how math can dictate art, Schmidhuber weaponizes a very old scientific principle for the canvas, right? Occam's razor. He basically argues that art is the art of omission.
Right. The less data you need to convey the true essence of an object, the more successful the art is.
That makes sense.
And to pull this out of the realm of, philosophy and ground it in hard mathematics, he relies on a heavy-hitting metric called Kolmogorov complexity.
Right. Kolmogorov complexity.
Yeah, in simple terms, the Kolmogorov complexity of an object is measured by the length of the absolute shortest possible computer program that can generate that specific object.
Okay, so a short program means a simple object.
Exactly. If an image requires this massive sprawling algorithm to render on a screen, it has high Kolmogorov complexity. But if it can be generated by a highly efficient, compact little program, it has low complexity.
I was actually trying to find a solid mental model for this while reading through your sources, and think about summarizing a wildly complicated 3-hour cinematic epic to a friend.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like, if you try to explain every single subplot, every man or character's motivation, every location change, your summary is going to be incredibly long and rambling. That's high complexity.
You lose them immediately.
Exactly. But if you can craft one single razor-sharp sentence that captures the exact emotional tone and narrative essence of the film that is low complexity, the better the summary, the lower the complexity.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. You are hunting for the absolute minimum amount of data required to perfectly recreate the essence of the original subject.
Okay.
And based on this, Schmidhuber proposes this new artistic genre, low complexity art, which operates on two specific goals.
And one of them is totally subjective, right?
Right. Goal one is subjective. The drawing simply has to look right to a human. A vase must look like a vase. But goal two is purely objective.
The math part.
Yes. The drawing must have a provably small Kolmogorov complexity, and an informed observer should be able to intuitively sense that underlying mathematical simplicity.
Which honestly sounds like a dream for someone who can't draw. Like, you just feed the parameters into a computer, press a button, and the machine spits out the perfect minimalist masterpiece.
You'd think so, right?
But the paper makes it very clear that this is mathematically impossible.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the massive roadblock known as the non-computability of Kolmogorov complexity.
Non-computability. That sounds intimidating.
It does, but the mechanism behind it is rooted in a famous computer science puzzle called the halting problem. Basically, there is no universal algorithm that can just look at an object and automatically calculate the absolute shortest program to describe it.
Because the computer would have to test every possible shorter program to see if it works.
Exactly. And it would never know if a program it's testing is just taking a really long time to run or if it's stuck in an infinite loop and will literally never finish.
Oh, wow.
So the machine would just run forever trying to prove it found the absolute shortest code.
Right, so because a machine cannot mathematically guarantee the shortest path, it can't do the heavy lifting for you.
Precisely. The artist is still entirely necessary. A human still has to struggle, experiment, and use their biological intuition to capture the essence of the object in the simplest possible way. The math is really merely the medium they're manipulating.
So if staring at a blank canvas with a calculator isn't going to work, what actual tools did Schmidhuber give artists to ensure they were hitting that low complexity?
Well, he needed a coding scheme.
Right, a system simple enough to require almost zero data, but flexible enough to draw recognizable shapes.
And he landed on the circle.
The circle. Why the circle?
Because from a purely mathematical standpoint, drawing a circle is incredibly cheap. It only requires 3 pieces of data in a 2-dimensional space.
Just 3.
Yep, an x-coordinate, a y-coordinate for the center point, and a radius. That is it.
Wow, okay.
It's vastly more efficient than trying to define some complex, irregular freehand curve. So to harness this, he developed what he calls the fractal circle scheme.
I really want you, the listener, to try and visualize this rule set as we map it out, because the strictness of it is brilliant.
It really is.
So the artist starts with a blank page and draws one single circle. Let's call it the foundational frame. Then you pick a point anywhere on the edge of that first circle and use it as the center to draw a second circle of the exact same size.
Right, so now you have a Venn diagram.
2 intersecting circles.
And this is where the fractal geometry takes over. Rule 1, wherever 2 of these equal-sized circles touch or intersect, you must draw another circle of the exact same size, using that intersection as the new center point.
And then rule 2, inside every single one of those circles, you draw another circle that is exactly half the size, sharing the same center point.
Exactly. And you keep repeating these rules recursively.
The result is this incredibly dense, symmetrical, overlapping grid of circles that looks like a hyper-complex mandala.
Yeah, and Schmidhuber calls these the legal circles.
Legal circles.
Right, because if you want to draw something, you are only allowed to trace arcs from this specific grid. You cannot draw a freehand line at all. You build your image purely out of legal arcs.
Okay, but see, I have to push back on this premise just a bit.
Go for it.
If I am an artist, limiting myself to a rigid mathematical grid of intersecting circles seems like it would absolutely paralyze my creativity. Like, doesn't this framework force everything to look incredibly robotic and stiff?
I get why you'd think that, but if you look at the broader history of human expression, extreme constraints actually act as a catalyst for creativity, rather than a cage.
Okay, how so?
Consider poetry. A haiku forces you to distill an entire emotional landscape into just 17 syllables.
Oh, right.
Or a sonnet traps you in a strict rhythm and rhyme scheme. Those rigid structures prevent the poet from rambling. They force the discovery of the absolute perfect word.
Finding the ultimate signal in the noise.
Exactly. This fractal circle scheme operates the exact same way for visual arts. It's a puzzle of visual efficiency. Stripping away the noise forces the artist to unearth the geometric truth of the object. And the ultimate flex of a low-complexity artist is navigating this grid efficiently.
Right, because if you dive deep enough into the fractal layers, you can find thousands of microscopic circles.
Yes, and with enough tiny circles, you could trace practically anything, even a photorealistic landscape.
But doing so requires a massive amount of data to specify the coordinates and radius of every single microcircle.
Exactly. It completely destroys your Kolmogorov complexity. The true challenge is finding the essence of your subject using just a handful of massive, sweeping arcs from the largest circles in the grid.
Okay, let's look at what actually happens when an artist submits to this game. Your sources provided 3 visual examples of these low-complexity masterpieces.
They're great examples, too.
The first is a cartoon of a butterfly approaching a vase with a flower. And when you look at the underlying grid, the sweeping, elegant curves of the vase perfectly align with the large structural circles.
Right, while the delicate, intricate wings of the butterfly are constructed from the smaller, internal half-size circles, it demonstrates the flexibility of the grid.
But the second example is where the genius of the system really reveals itself.
The woman's profile.
Yes, a woman's profile in black and white. At first glance, it looks like a very elegant, fluid Art Deco illustration. You would never immediately realize it was born from a rigid mathematical formula.
But when you overlay the fractal circle grid, you see the trick.
You really do. The artist used the exact same circular contours to draw completely different parts of her face. The curve that defines the underside of her nose is the exact same mathematical curve that defines the top of her upper lip.
And that same curve is used a third time to shape her chin.
Wait, she's essentially just reusing the same line of code over and over to save data. It's brilliant.
That's exactly what's happening. The drawing achieves a massive reduction in algorithmic complexity through that reuse. The computer program doesn't have to define a new shape for the chin. It simply tells the renderer, take the data for circle 47 and apply it here, here, and here.
Wow. And then there's the third example.
Ah, the gym logo.
Yeah, a stylized logo designed for a gym showing the upper body of a weightlifter holding a barbell. The mathematical symmetry here is almost showing off.
It really is. The massive shoulders of the weightlifter, his bulging biceps, and his triceps, they are all defined by circles of the exact same size.
It creates this geometric idealization of the human form. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, the dumbbell.
Yes, I was looking at the dumbbell the weightlifter is holding across his waist. It's a perfectly straight horizontal line. My immediate thought was, wait a minute, the entire premise is that you can only trace circles. How do you legally draw a straight line in a circle-only universe?
This might be the single most elegant mathematical loophole in the entire paper.
Right, because Schmidhuber defines the straight line of the dumbbell as a legal circle with a nearly infinite radius.
Exactly. A straight line is just a curve from a circle that is infinitely massive.
It completely satisfies the draconian rules of the grid while introducing a totally new visual element to the canvas.
And this shared architecture brings us to a vital concept in algorithmic information theory, mutual algorithmic information.
Mutual algorithmic information.
Right, because the butterfly, the woman's face, and the weightlifter are visually distinct, but they all rely on the exact same initialization rules to generate that foundational grid.
Okay, so if you were storing these three images on a computer hard drive, it would actually take fewer bits of data to encode all three of them together in one folder than to encode them entirely separately.
Yes, they share a massive amount of mathematical DNA. You just store the rules for the grid once, and then store the tracing coordinates for the three images.
And you know, in the art world, when a body of work shares a profound underlying structural foundation, we don't call it mutual algorithmic information.
What do we call it?
We call it an artistic style.
Style as data compression. It is a profound shift in perspective. And, proving these drawings are mathematically simple is one thing the geometry checks out.
Right.
But the paper wades into much deeper waters by asking, why do human beings actually find these highly compressible, mathematically rigid drawings beautiful?
So we are transitioning from the realm of geometry directly into the psychology of the human brain.
Exactly.
Schmidhuber introduces the theory of minimum description length, or MDL. This theory treats the human mind as a literal biological zip file.
A zip file.
It suggests our brains are constantly actively trying to compress the chaotic, overwhelming visual data of the real world into familiar, manageable internal codes.
And to illustrate this, the source material dives into a really fascinating psychological debate from the 1990s regarding what makes a human face beautiful.
Oh, this part was so interesting.
Right. So the paper cites a study by Langlois and Rogman. They took photographs of many different faces and used early computer algorithms to digitally blend them together, creating a literal average face.
Just a composite of everyone.
Yep. And their test subjects consistently perceived this perfectly average blended face as the most attractive.
But then another group of researchers, Parrott and his colleagues, challenged this.
They did. They found that while people liked the average face, they strongly preferred attractive averages.
Meaning they took faces already rated as highly attractive and used software to caricature them, exaggerating the specific features that deviated from the strict average, pushing them further away from the mathematical mean.
Exactly. And Schmidhuber looks at both of these psychological studies and basically urges deep skepticism.
Why is that?
He points out a glaring flaw in their methodology. Both studies relied on specific, man-made digital blending algorithms. To blend those faces in the 90s, the software was essentially taking anchor points on a photograph and cross-fading the pixels.
Oh, so it's a very artificial way of doing it.
Right. And Schmidhuber argues that it is incredibly arrogant to assume the human visual cortex processes and stores data using the same mathematical pixel averaging tricks developed by software engineers.
That makes total sense. We have absolutely no idea what actual algorithm the human brain uses to store a prototype face.
None. The brain has its own internal coding scheme developed over millions of years of evolution and a lifetime of personal experiences to efficiently encode faces through neural pathways.
Right, so the prototype face stored in your brain isn't some cross-faded JPEG. It is whatever structural representation requires the absolute least amount of mental energy to process.
The ideal mental prototype minimizes the description length. So if a new face you encounter on the street mathematically aligns with your internal, highly compressed neural prototype, your brain doesn't have to burn energy computing the differences.
It processes the visual data effortlessly. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you navigate the world? Let's step away from visual art for a second and think about why a really catchy pop song is so incredibly pleasing to listen to.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Is it just the production value? Or is it because the chord progressions are so predictably structured, so perfectly matched to the auditory patterns your brain has already cataloged 1,000 times, that your mind can seamlessly compress the data?
It literally feels good because your brain is doing less work.
Exactly.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests a staggering, almost mechanical definition of aesthetics. Beauty might simply be high conditional probability.
High conditional probability.
Right. We find things beautiful when they perfectly match the internal coding schemes our brains have already developed to understand the world. When sensory input compresses beautifully in your mind, your biological machinery rewards you with a dopamine hit, and you perceive it as beautiful.
Which admittedly strips away some of the romantic magic, but it replaces it with an awe-inspiring look at our own biological machinery.
It really does.
And we have to remember the context here. Schmidhuber is writing this in 1997. The internet is barely crawling. Cell phones are the size of bricks. Yet he extrapolates this theory into the future, imagining what will happen when our external technology finally catches up with the processing power of the human brain.
His foresight is incredible. I mean, in the final section of the paper, he predicts the creation of virtual ateliers or virtual art studios.
In 1997.
Yeah. He describes these spaces being implemented on powerful computers using stereoscopic virtual reality and data gloves.
He is literally detailing the mechanics of modern consumer VR headsets and spatial computing decades before the hardware even existed, decades before anyone uttered the word metaverse.
He completely foresaw how these tools would shatter the 2D limitations of his own low-complexity art. He knew the flat fractal circle scheme was just a stepping stone.
Right.
He predicted that in these stereoscopic virtual reality spaces, artists would move into three-dimensional sphere or bubble schemes.
Imagine standing in a virtual room, wearing haptic data gloves, and using simple hand gestures to summon, scale, and intersect massive, mathematically perfect 3D spheres.
It sounds like sci-fi, but it's here now.
You could sculpt incredibly complex, hyper-efficient objects in real time, just walking around them as you build.
It represents the natural evolution of the medium, heavily dependent on the evolution of our tools. Schmidhuber notes that cavemen didn't lack artistic vision. They just lacked the chemical technology to create the vibrant colors of the Impressionists.
Right.
And the Impressionists didn't lack imagination. They just lacked the processors for computer graphics. Low-complexity art was a genre waiting for the computing power of the 21st century to be fully realized.
We did. We started with the age-old wisdom of Occam's razor, the inherent beauty of omission. We explored how Kolmogorov complexity turns the search for an object's visual essence into a mathematical hunt for the shortest possible algorithm.
Yeah.
We walked through the rigid, recursive world of fractal circles, discovering how extreme constraints force the creation of brilliant, efficient art, like our weightlifter and his infinite radius dumbbell.
My favorite part.
And then we delved into the brain as a biological zip file, where beauty is simply the relief of easy data compression. And finally, we looked at a visionary, spot-on glimpse of virtual reality art studios predicted from the depths of 1997.
We've completely deconstructed the idea that beauty is just a mysterious, ethereal feeling and explored the highly compelling theory that it is, at its core, a perfect alignment of data.
Yeah.
But this raises an important question, one that we should really sit with.
Okay, what is it?
Well, if human beauty and good style simply mean that something is easily compressible by the brain's internal algorithm, if we only like things because they are easy for our minds to process, what does that mean for truly revolutionary disruptive art?
Oh, wow.
Right? Does true originality actually require a deliberate act of inefficiency? Think about it. To create something entirely new, something that shatters the current paradigm, an artist might have to intentionally create something mathematically long and highly complex.
A piece of art that actively refuses to be cleanly compressed by the comfortable, established algorithms in our heads.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder. The next time you walk through a gallery or scroll through a feed of perfectly curated, highly aesthetically pleasing designs, I want you to look at the art around you and ask yourself,
Is it brilliant or is it just easy?
right, is this beautiful because it's genuinely brilliant, or is it just beautiful because it's incredibly easy for your brain to compute?
That's the question.
Thank you for trusting us with your sources and joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the algorithms both in your computers and in your own mind. We'll catch you next time.